8 o'clock. A very good evening to you and welcome to this edition of News Hour. I'm Vuyom Buli.
Good evening and welcome. I'm Nadia Levine. In the news tonight, signals of concerns as President Thabo Mbeki arranges to meet Zimbabwe's Robert Mugabe soon. The child who is the human face of the tragedy in Mozambique turns 1 this week. And in our debate tonight, we talk to experts about reasons for the seeming upsurge in lawlessness in this country and who is to blame.
And coming up later in sports news today, Bafana triumphant against Malawi in Blantyre, the final golf tournament of this year's Sunshine Tour, and possible disciplinary action against Springbok and Cat Centre Yapi Mulder.
And we continue. President Thabo Mbeki will soon meet with President Robert Mugabe to discuss the deteriorating political and economic situation in Zimbabwe.
Mbeki's announcement that he telephoned Mugabe recently to set up a meeting is seen as a signal of growing concern in the government about the effects of the Zimbabwe situation on South Africa.
President Mbeki made the announcement after meeting with his International Investment Council at Somerset West near Cape Town. The prominent international business executives who serve on the council were there to advise the government on what it has to do to attract investment and overcome negative perceptions about the country. Zimbabwe was one of the concerns they raised.
It's a matter of concern must be dealt with, that apart from anything else, it impacts negatively on this country.
Mbeki's last meeting with Mugabe was a few months ago. It focused on land redistribution, the country's economic problems, and its troubled relations with the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank. He said these issues would be raised again, and so would the Zimbabwe government's recent moves against judges and journalists.
We are, as you would imagine, continue to be concerned about the situation as well. Some of the things that have been happening recently are, to all of us as South Africans, matters of very serious concern, things that have been affecting the judges, affecting the press, apart from the earlier questions to do with the land redistribution and so on. And we'll be discussing all of these things with them.
Members of the Investment Council said they supported the way in which the government was dealing with the Zimbabwe crisis. But they also said the government would have to do more to draw a distinction in investors' minds between what's happening in South Africa and what's happening north of the Limpopo.
The reality of what's happening here is fundamentally different, but that needs to be communicated. It needs to be communicated clearly, effectively, and continuously. And I think it will be, and can be. And certainly over the next few months, I've no doubt that both the South African government and those who know South Africa very well will make sure that this is put back in its proper balance. But one cannot deny that it is a shadow hanging over South Africa which needs to be dealt with.
Mbeki's International Investment Council will meet for the third time in September. Council members have applauded the government's new economic action plan and have urged that it be speedily implemented. They also said that positive signals about South Africa would have to be reinforced by increased confidence and investment from South African corporations. Andre Jordan, SABC, Somerset West.
Meanwhile, the Zimbabwean Finance Minister Simba Makoni has conceded that his country is in a serious economic decline. Appearing on the SABC's Newsmaker program today, Makoni said the decline has become more severe in the last 5 years.
Threats against the judiciary, land invasions, and the expulsion of foreign journalists have all contributed to a lack of international investor confidence in Zimbabwe.
GDP growth, income per capita, employment, foreign currency earnings, all your standard indicators of the health of the economy have certainly been on the downward trend.
However, Makoni insisted that the Zimbabwean government was still upholding the rule of law and democracy. Appearing on the same program, an analyst from the South African Institute of International Affairs, Mweletsi Mbeki, said the Zimbabwean ruling party, ZANU-PF, continue to support militias which terrorize ordinary Zimbabweans.
What the South African government and all the other neighbors of Zimbabwe should do is to insist on the democratic process in Zimbabwe being allowed to take place and the opposition parties being allowed to operate without intimidation.
Mbeki said that Zimbabwe was giving Africa a bad name and that it was becoming a burden to South Africa.
I think the position of South Africa is really, of the South African government, can only be sustainable in the short term, and quiet diplomacy, that is.
It is now up to President Mbeki to change quiet diplomacy to active diplomacy and engage the Zimbabwean government more forcefully.
Mozambican authorities are on full alert for the flooding of the Zambezi River expected to worsen next week. The river, which runs through the center of the country, has already risen 8 meters above its normal level, affecting almost 80,000 people along its banks. Earlier, the Mozambican government appealed for $30 million from the international community. South Africa has already agreed to send helicopters to help with rescue and relief operations if the situation worsens.
The Zambezi River has turned into a sea of water kilometers wide and 8 meters above its normal level. Almost 80,000 people have lost their homes and thousands of hectares of maize, beans and rice are underwater. The main route to the northern part of Mozambique that runs past Kaya, about 200 kilometers north of Beira, is completely cut off. It's feared that the river could rise even higher if heavy rains in the southern African interior force officials at the Kariba and Kohorabasa dams to open more floodgates. Some locals have refused to leave their homes, but 26,000 people have already been rescued and taken to camps set up by the Mozambican government and aid organizations. The airfield at Kaya is being used as a distribution center for emergency supplies.
The food is coming in, supplied by the World Food Programme. The people are also still coming in. It's not enough for the time being, but we'll see when more food comes in. There's also needs of medicines. People are coming in with malaria, diarrhea, and other of those local diseases, and more medicine is necessary.
Flood victims are hoping they can return to their homes in time to replant lost crops before autumn ends their chances of a harvest. Sarah van Vieren, SABC, Kaya, Mozambique.
Mozambique's most famous flood victim, Rosita Shiburi, turns 1 this week. Rosita made headlines around the world last year after she was born in a tree and airlifted with her mother, Sophia, from the flooded Limpopo River Valley in a daring rescue mission. A year later, floods are again ravishing central Mozambique, leaving a trail of destruction in their wake. SABC News' Frank Farrell and cameraman Desmond Ladla traveled to Shibuto to find out how life has changed for Mozambique's youngest celebrity and her family.
A helicopter hovers above the flooded Limpopo River. A medic is lowered down to rescue people in distress. He finds a young mother who's just given birth. A precious bundle is whisked away to safety. These images become the human face of Mozambique's tragedy and survival. She's called Rosita. A clan lives in Shibuto. Yet a Shiburu elder explains what happened. Rosita's father Salvador is at home, but his wife and daughter are in Maputo. The family now stays in this new 3-bedroom house built by the Mozambican government. Salvador leads a comfortable life, but he's not happy. He's had to take over his wife's responsibilities and look after their 2 other children. In the living room, he turns on the electricity and sits next to 5-year-old Serena. In the courtyard, 3-year-old Benedito plays with the water. Salvador is a different man.
Eu não tenho gado, não tenho cabrito, não tenho nada. Agora já tenho cabrito, gato e casa também.
As night falls, the boys round up the cattle. Salvador and his father Papa walk to the car to inspect their new stock of wealth. The women prepare dinner over an open fire, even though they can cook in the house. This family is the talk of the town in Shibuto.
Nós temos ciúmes, porque muita gente às vezes pensa, eu também vou ter grávida, vou esperar das cheias para ir dar parto em cima de uma árvore. Há muita gente que pensa talvez ir para lá no rio, esperar das cheias para ir ter bebê, para também eu ter uma casa oferecida pelo Estado.
Ah, não, cara, eu não conheço.
Não conhece a família Rosita? Não sabe aquela criança que nasceu na árvore?
Não.
Eu não vejo que nenhuma pessoa que pode ter ciúme com aquela senhora. Porque aquilo ali é uma coisa que ele também foi dado com Deus. Não foi ele que pediu, isso pronto. Cada qual o Deus dá o que entende.
In Maputo the next day, Rosita and her mother are on their way to the bank. They're accompanied by a self-appointed interpreter, Fatima. They don't have to wait like others. The teller takes Sophia's documents and index finger because she's illiterate. She gets $600 American for about 5,000 rands. It's 20 times more than Mozambique's minimum monthly wage. Later in the day, Sophia sits on a park bench with Rosita, who's hungry. Sophia has only one wish for her baby.
Toda até acabar e também fazer um pouco de fazer menino, que fazer de ensadora, de escrever ele quando já está.
Rosita celebrates her first birthday on Thursday. In less than 12 months, she's done more for her family and her country than toddlers her age.
Rosita has traveled the world and has been showered with gifts. Her family is enjoying a life of privilege. But little is known about the more than 80,000 children under the age of 5 that were also affected in last year's floods. Frank Ferro, SABC, Maputo, Mozambique.
Moving to news further afield, U.S. Secretary of State Colin Powell has called on the Arab world to contain what he calls the threat by Iraq after reports that Saddam Hussein may have nuclear weapons in 3 years. Powell is on a visit to the Middle East. He's also called on both Israelis and Palestinians to end a cycle of violence in which more than 400 people, mainly Palestinians, have been killed.
Powell met Israeli President-elect Ariel Sharon this morning. The two leaders discussed the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, but Powell's main focus in the Middle East is Iraq's Saddam Hussein.
All of us have to be vigilant, recognizing that these terrible weapons he's trying to develop will be aimed at the people of the region. He has shown before that he is more than willing to use weapons of this nature against the people of the region to pursue his own ends.
A report in a German newspaper says Iraq may be able to attack its neighbors with nuclear weapons in 3 years and fire a missile as far as Europe by year 2005. But in Gaza, Palestinians displayed their solidarity with Iraq and warned Powell not to use this trip to rally support against Hussein. They told Powell to go home and satellite U.S. and Israeli flags in a picture of Powell. Sharon has put an end to violence as a condition for peace talks with the Palestinians. And Palestinian President Yasser Arafat has voiced hope that the peace talks will resume, this after his meeting with Powell this afternoon. Powell says the challenge lies in persuading the parties to move away from violence and from preventing a total collapse of the economy in the region.
The former U.S. President George W. Bush Sr. and some of his military commanders have been guests of honor in Kuwait, as that country held celebrations to mark the 10th anniversary of Iraq's defeat in the Gulf War. Guests included former Argentinian President Carlos Menem and former British Prime Ministers Margaret Thatcher and John Major.
Bush and his wife Barbara, along with other prominent guests, flew into a royal welcome over the weekend. A parade to the city was well received, although many Kuwaitis feel the celebrations are incomplete, with Saddam Hussein still in power. This time, 10 years ago, a ground offensive by a US-led multinational force from some 30 countries was launched against Iraqi troops, who swiftly withdrew from Kuwait, bringing an end to the 6-week-long Gulf crisis. Kuwait is currently awaiting talks on Washington's future plans for dealing with Iraq, when new U.S. Secretary of State Colin Powell arrives today. Diplomats said the talks were expected to include plans by the new administration to increase pressure on Iraq. A joint U.S.-British military attack on Iraqi targets last week revived hopes in Kuwait for an end to Saddam's rule. They hope that Bush's son, the new U.S. President George W. Bush, will be able to overthrow him.
And now for a look at other stories making international news. Thousands of mainly Madurese refugees packing themselves and their belongings into trucks have fled Dayak mobs in Sampit, Indonesia. Over 200 people have been slaughtered in a week of ethnic bloodshed between immigrants from Madura Island of Java and indigenous Dayaks of the Kalimantan region. 3 homes belonging to Madurese were torched. Witnesses say the violence began as fighting between rival groups and then turned into Dayak attacks on Madurese. Police have arrested 80 people, but spear-carrying Dayaks still roam the streets.
7 people are believed dead after a light plane carrying parachute students plunged into the Caribbean near the Venezuelan coast. 6 bodies have been recovered so far, and the 7th remains at sea. Officials say it was unclear what caused the accident. The plane apparently crashed and exploded as it hit the water about 2 miles from the airport.
A giant NASA prototype balloon was finally launched from the Australian outback to begin its circumnavigation of the globe.
But celebrations were short-lived. The balloon crashed back to Earth only 6 hours later.
Early this morning, NASA's revolutionary balloon stood 250 meters above the desert, ready for its maiden voyage to the edge of space. Conditions were still, and it seemed that at last 2 months of waiting was over. Within minutes, the balloon had climbed higher than the path of a jumbo jet. Within 2 hours of release, it had reached a height of 36 kilometers. There, the balloon would have spent the size of an enclosed football stadium. But then disaster struck. As NASA scientists monitored its progress across the continent, the balloon hurtled back to Earth. The reason remains unclear. Over the next 2 weeks, it was going to be used to study exotic particles of cosmic radiation known as night glow. The balloon's unique seal design could one day have revolutionized space research. Researchers had hoped the helium balloon would be a cheap alternative to satellites.
After the break, as the King Commission closes its door, we ask if there is unfinished business still to be resolved.
You can see the intensity in their eyes. They want to learn to help themselves, go through life in a positive way. But what I really want them to do is go through life with a negative.
After Annalene Peterson from the Tiger Valley Pick and Pay attended a company-sponsored AIDS workshop, she decided to use her home to extend the program to teenagers in her community. Annalene is one of many examples of our culture of dignity and respect within Pick and Pay has become a beacon of hope. Every South African, every day, can make a difference.
Yes. Save 200 grand on this Vodacom offer. A Siemens C25 cell phone plus free Vodacom Power Starter Pack value $199 for only $799. Includes SIM card, 379 days free incoming calls, and 29 rand airtime voucher. Plus card members earn 159 points and save 5% on all Vodacom recharge vouchers. Think and Vodacom, helping you connect for less.
There is a car moving in a new direction. Which direction are you moving in? The new Volvo S60.
The Millennium Africa Plan, MAP, is fast gaining momentum. This week, senior officials of the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund visited Africa to help further develop the plan.
MAP is also expected to feature prominently at the Organization of African Unity Summit in Libya later this week.
The Millennium Africa Plan, or MAP, aims to ensure the sustained development of the continent, a continent that has a reputation for successfully sustaining poverty, corruption, war, disease, and the list goes on. As President Mbeki put it recently, the single word for Africa in the eyes of the world is calamity. MAP seeks to reverse this. In Davos, Switzerland earlier this year, the 3 architects of MAP, Mbeki, Nigerian President Olusegun Obasanjo, and Algerian President Abdulaziz Bouteflika presented their plan. Although it's not yet finalized, some of the elements of the program include ensuring peace, stability, and good governance, debt cancellation for developing countries, narrowing the digital divide between the developed and developing countries, developing financing mechanisms, and increasing investments as opposed to increasing aid. After 2 days in Saudi Arabia this week, Mbeki joined Bouteflika and Obasanjo in Mali, and together they met World Bank and IMF officials.
To plan how do we cooperate in the elaboration of the plan, and how do we bring into that whole Africa Recovery Program the existing programs of those organizations, so that they are not contrary to what we are planning. So, and indeed, if there is already work done by these organizations with regard to elements of that African recovery, then of course there will be no need for us to duplicate.
A draft document known as the G2, developed by a steering committee consisting of experts from all 3 countries, that is, Nigeria, South Africa and Algeria, was accepted by all parties.
It was decided, therefore, to accelerate about 4 major elements of the MEP program around TB, malaria, TB, tuberculosis, malaria, information and communication technology, and HIV/AIDS. That those programs, in view of the seriousness with which the leaders, the 3 leaders, put into these particular programs, or place in these particular programs, these programs will therefore be fast-tracked.
But an enormous amount of work still needs to be done before the public can see the final plan.
In fact, the President will, as travel to the OAU summit this week, precisely to try and ensure that, African leaders, the 40 or so odd states that are part of the OAU, that buy into this particular program.
So far, the IMF and the World Bank have given the plan the thumbs up, and the ball now remains firmly in the court of the African leaders to seize this opportunity to change the course of the continent, hopefully for the better and for the good. Miranda Stradum, SABC, Johannesburg.
Lack of rescue equipment at the Mafeking police station in the Northwest Province left a man who wanted to commit suicide by climbing a telephone tower stranded for more than 6 hours. The Potchefstroom police were summoned to help save the man's life.
Residents of Unit 7 in Mafeking braved rainy weather to witness the drama. Around 6 yesterday evening, 26-year-old Armstrong Mufukeng decided that death is better than a life of death, torment, and being a sole breadwinner. His girlfriend says he had indicated that one day he would take the death route. He wants to kill himself as he is a sole breadwinner. Mafeking residents were concerned about the lack of resources from the local police and appealed to the relevant department to look into it.
There's a man who's been trapped in this tower for 4 hours now. We are waiting for equipment from Flexshop and Potchefstroom. We want to know from the Northwest government what is being done. We need our own safety equipment. And we need to know from the people who are responsible for this tower, whether it's whatever company, don't they take precautions in installing such towers?
Aeromet and Potchefstroom Emergency Services eventually rescued Mufukeng. Aeromet spokesperson Conrad Jones says they had to inject and stabilize Mufukeng as he was difficult to handle. Police say Mufukeng will be charged with attempted suicide. Feeling Mahape, SABC, Mafeking.
Judge Edwin King caused a stir in local circles last week when he unexpectedly announced that he was halting his commission of inquiry into cricket match fixing, subject to the compilation of his final report. The high-profile commission was set up to investigate claims of irregular conduct by players in the national team, particularly by former captain Hansi Cronje. King said his decision had been precipitated by a threat from Cronje's lawyers to challenge the constitutional validity of his appointment to chair the commission.
After 8 months of work, the commission came to an abrupt end. There had been widespread speculation that the commission might disband, but this was vehemently denied, and dates were set for its resumption. However, that was not to be, as Judge King finally drew stumps. At the conclusion, King said it was only Cronje and his former teammates, Herschel Gibbs and Henry Williams, who had been involved in the match-fixing scandal. He made it clear that there was no evidence implicating any of the other South African players, officials or administrators in any wrongdoings. The judge strongly denies that the King Commission buckled under pressure from Cronje's lawyers. He says the Commission achieved its objectives of investigating the claims of match-fixing. King insists that it was never a witch hunt.
The Commission has achieved its objective.
It has uncovered the sort of malpractice that had been taking place. It has resulted in the appointment of an investigatory committee under a very senior and experienced retired London policeman commissioner by the International Cricket Council, and it's also alerted the cricket authorities in the various other cricketing countries to have a look at their own house.
Cronje admitted during the Commission's hearings in June that he had accepted more than 700,000 rand from bookmakers to throw matches. He was offered immunity from prosecution, provided that King was satisfied Cronje had revealed everything to the inquiry. However, King says he still hasn't made up his mind.
Quite frankly, it's something that I need to have a closer look into, and also invite Mr. Cronje's legal representatives to make some input. So I haven't taken a final decision as to that particular aspect of things.
Cronje's lawyer says his client should be granted immunity. King said he was unsure when his final report would be ready.
I will be offering the legal representatives of parties who have been concerned in the Commission the opportunity to submit written representations to me as to what should and should not go into the report, and obviously you can't expect busy lawyers to do that overnight, so they must be allowed several weeks. So it's not imminent.
Cronje was sacked in April after Indian police accused him of being involved in match fixing. He was banned for life by the United Cricket Board, but is challenging the ban in court. Opener Gibbs and bowler Williams admitted agreeing to underperforming for money, but said they never went through with the deal. They were banned from international competition until January this year. The Commission's work was hampered by various factors. Its chief investigator, Shamila Batoi, went to India last year to try and obtain authenticated transcripts of telephone conversations, but she returned empty-handed. There were also several challenges from Cronje's legal team. In December, the Cape High Court ruled against an attempt by King to impose January the 25th as the date for the hearings to resume. On February the 5th, Cronje's lawyers said they might attempt a challenge to King following a ruling in the Constitutional Court that a judge could not be the head of a special investigative unit. The Commission immediately cancelled the sitting set for February the 19th and said it would seek clarity on the ruling before deciding whether the inquiry would resume. That decision's now been made. The government says it's satisfied with the reasons given by King for ending the Commission.
The judge has been there by an act which was really put together by the President's office. So he has written to the President's office, and we will wait when he, the judge, puts in his final report.
Although there will be no more hearings, the Commission will examine a forensic report to be completed by a team of auditors. Judge King will then deliver his final report. It's expected to have far-reaching impact on cricket in South Africa. John Bailey, SABC, Cape Town.
Thousands of disabled people in the Eastern Cape will not benefit from the 30 rand increase announced by Finance Minister Trevor Manuel in his budget speech this week.
They were suspended from the disability grant list in July of 1999 and are still fighting to be reinstated. The Grahamstown High Court ruled earlier this year that they should be reinstated, but the Welfare Department has appealed against the ruling.
While the legal rumble rages on, hunger and hardship are the daily loads of these disabled people. To highlight the presence of close to 100,000 claimants, Karen Clayton and Bernard Wyman chained themselves to this statue. But their process against the suspension of disability grants seems to have been fruitless. 18 months down the line, nothing has changed.
They've made many promises, one of them being mobile assessment clinics in the rural areas. That has not even been tendered to date. Another promise was that they would set up systems to fast-track disability grants, and nothing has been done in that sphere either.
Government's commitment to addressing the plight of the disabled is now being questioned.
We're not the only organization of disabled people, but there are quite a number of organizations, some of which are parastatals. They haven't even spoken to those organizations in terms of looking at what could be done.
People that are clearly permanently disabled have been struck off the roll. This man now depends on neighbors and his blind sister for food.
I am hungry. I can't even take the test for epilepsy because I have no food.
The Welfare Department appears to have no proper plan to assess the disabled. It's now also doing away with using district surgeons for examinations.
What then the reviewal process of the policy itself entails is to move towards establishing panels in the different districts in the respective provinces, so that the process of application and accessibility is then determined by that panel.
While the department continues to grope in the dark for a process to decide who gets and who does not, more and more generally disabled people are being left to fend for themselves. Dolisa Sigadi, SABC, Fisho.
After the break, we take a look at the situation in Hermanus as gangs stake out new territory.
Careful, Jeremy.
Go.
Jeremy, quickly, go and study.
Get up the pool. Because I'm a daddy, my sister. Let's go. Anything for me.
Just the chance.
Come on, Sandra. There you go. Jared, quickly. Come, boy. Up the pool, boy. Come on. Grab the towel. Let's go. Hi.
Who is he?
Good day. Can I help you?
Who are you?
We were just... Sorry, who are you?
How do you do?
Don't say.
There's been some confusion here, and, well,
Now, look here.
we're on our way now.
Just how far would you go to experience the joy of owning your own home?
Red box, nice pool. Gotta go.
Talk to us about our incredibly low 12.25% home loan rate and make your dreams come true. NBS, it's about family.
I always wanted to create a place that was perfect.
What makes a great place is the people. But first, the place has to be just right.
Nice chair. Perfection isn't something that just happens in a day. My restaurant is about bringing together the best of all worlds.
Our chef is really passionate about his food.
Big up, Davidson.
He's a top man.
The right menu.
Speciality.
This bar had to be made by hand. Every detail. It's quite a weight. But quality is worth waiting for.
One of Pretoria's most valued historical landmarks, Pretoria Station, was almost completely destroyed this week. Damage is estimated at about 30 million rand after disgruntled commuters are said to have torched the building because trains had been delayed. But this is not the only incident in the capital which has recently made headlines both locally and abroad. The recent upswing in crime has also raised the question of whether or not the capital has been gripped by lawlessness and whether police are losing the battle against crime in the city.
Why is this happening is a question many are asking. Pretoria has started off the new year with much to be desired. There have been reports of a dramatic increase in crime, and just when the capital thought it couldn't get any worse, one of the city's most valued historical buildings was gutted by a major inferno, which firefighters battled to contain for more than 4 hours. 5 people have been arrested so far on charges of arson and malicious damage to property. The near destruction of Pretoria Station has also not helped in restoring the city's marred image. In fact, the fire even made headlines abroad. But does the incident truly reflect a major degree of lawlessness, and does it reflect that society is reaching a breaking point?
We should not overestimate the importance of this particular Pretoria Station incident. I think it was an incident that was in a specific context. I think it's people's frustration about a specific issue. So that's a sad incident, and I think we can not condole it for any moment. But I do think we should not pull it out of complete context.
National Police Commissioner Jackie Selebi says recent incidents in Pretoria do not reflect a major degree of lawlessness.
There are cases of lawlessness, such as demonstrated by the fire that was organized at the station. But it is also not a general phenomenon. South Africans, by their very nature, are amongst the majority of people who would want to avoid getting themselves in such activities. There are a few that we must attend to and eradicate from our society. So it's not a generalized thing. If I said that, I will be misrepresenting the people of South Africa. It's not a generalized thing.
Recent reports on crime would suggest Pretoria is in trouble.
I think delivery of safety and security is not happening sufficiently, and therefore people are taking more and more opportunities, or criminals are exploring and exploiting that. In terms of the broader national delivery, there's lots of delivery happening out there, Julian. I mean, you need to see the amount of houses that are being electrified, the amount of telephones, the amount of water that reaches people. That's not really everyday knowledge to every one of us, but it is happening out there.
The National Police Commissioner argues that Pretoria is not in trouble and says police are definitely not losing the battle against crime.
We have a problem of crime in Pretoria, as we have in Durban, as we have in Bloemfontein. I think there has been an exaggeration of the situation in Pretoria. If you look at the levels of crime in the Gauteng province as a province, Pretoria comes at number 4, not number 1. So it can be true that we are in trouble in Pretoria, but the situation warrants that we do something about it, and we are ready to do that.
While it's a fact that crime continues in Pretoria, police and soldiers are continuing with major anti-crime operations throughout the area, which have yielded successes. This weekend alone, scores of suspects were arrested in the Sunnyside and Hatfield areas in a major anti-crime operation. Gillian Digavea, SABC, Pretoria.
Well, joining us now to take a closer look at the seeming upswing in crime and lawlessness in the country are Antoinette Lowe, head of the Institute for Security Studies, that's the Crime and Justice Program, as well as Shivana Sakur, acting coordinator of the Trauma Clinic at the Center for the Study of Violence and Reconciliation. Good evening to you both, ladies. Thank you for joining us. Antoinette, if I can start with you briefly, give us an idea in terms of, we've heard a lot of rumors and counter-accusations. Is crime increasing in South Africa?
Crime is increasing in South Africa based on the statistics we have, which is statistics from 94 to 99. Crime's gone up by about 15%, so it is going up. I don't think there's any doubt about that. There are some good news stories, though. Surprisingly, Johannesburg's crime has actually dropped between that time period by about 2%. But Pretoria, Cape Town and Durban, unfortunately, crime is going up, and most worrying, hijacking, which is obviously a serious crime, is going up quite dramatically. So I think that is a reality. If we had the statistics for the year 2000, which we don't have, we could actually confirm exactly what the latest trends are. But I think that the trends from 94 to 99 are long enough to tell us that there is an upward trend.
Interesting to note that crime in Johannesburg has dropped. What can we attribute this to, if anything?
It's very difficult to say because it varies from one suburb to the next. In some suburbs of Johannesburg, crime is still going up. But I think that we should attribute it to some of the police action, to the anti-hijacking campaign, because one of the crimes in Johannesburg that has gone down is in fact hijacking. So I think it's a mixed bag, and it's difficult to say without looking at specific areas in more detail.
What about the comments made by the new mayor of Pretoria, Tshwane, that the criminals have been driven out of Johannesburg, and that's why they're seeking refuge in Pretoria, and that's why the figures are up there? Would you concur with that?
Displacement, which is the technical term for that phenomenon, is a possibility. And I think with the focus of police and court and army attention on Johannesburg, and particularly the northern suburbs around car hijacking, it's possible that some of the syndicates have moved their activities to Pretoria. But I think that it's not only that. There must be other factors in Pretoria as well. And it would be for the police in Pretoria, in those areas where crime's going up, to really look into the issues in their areas.
In terms of the figures and the statistics that you do have currently, is it worse than before 1994?
Unfortunately, it's very difficult to say because the statistics before 1994 are not regarded as reliable. They only really covered the former white South Africa. They didn't include the homeland, so it's difficult to tell. It seems that crime has gone up from the early 90s, and that it's more or less leveled off. But we have seen since 1998, in more recent times, that crime is going up faster than any time since 1994. So I think that is also worrying.
Siobhan, if I can bring you in here, in terms of the psychology behind all of this, I mean, is it just economics, lack of jobs that we're seeing an increase in crime, and how do you explain the lawlessness as well?
I think most importantly, we have to look at that one of the striking causes is that about 80 to 90% of the population is still socioeconomically deprived. Okay, but in terms of lawlessness, is more the psychological effects of how people react to crime, taking what we term in psychologicals is the fight or flight syndrome. Mm-hmm. So in terms of the flight syndrome, it doesn't exactly mean that people are packing up and leaving the country, but it's more likely that this building of high walls, isolating themselves, and the lack of communication, and this in effect leads to isolation within the community environment. And you also find that people would be sort of driven towards more racialized societies. And in terms of the fight, it's the resistance and the anger. And people would then take arm themselves, or find that they're actually going to private security, joining groups like Parat or Makhofo.
What about mob justice? We've just seen recently in the past couple of weeks, both in Pimville and Duba, where the community saying they're fed up with police not responding, and they've taken matters into their own hands, and in doing so have essentially become the criminals themselves.
It would be unfair to actually blame the criminal justice system. Yes, there are serious flaws in the criminal justice system. Particularly when our experience at the trauma clinic, where victims who come to us for counseling experience secondary victimization at the police stations or at the magistrates' courts or in health clinics. But one needs to look at that in terms of the balance between prevention and law enforcement. That is the balance that the government hasn't been able to get correct. And that there's very little focus on serious matters such as jobs, such as youth development, or such as in terms of education, mm-hmm. and there's much more focus on policing and on the criminal justice system.
Antoinette, we've seen a lot of crime plans being put into place. We've been talking about it. We seem to have done an awful lot of talking about it. When do you get to the point and say, all right, we've spoken about it, it's time now to translate that into a reality?
Well, I think that one thing we have to realize is that you can put a lot of money into the criminal justice system. And in fact, we have seen more and more being spent on criminal justice in this country in the last 10 years. But that doesn't necessarily mean crime comes down. Crime's actually been going up despite the money being put into
What about the budget allocation that's been made in terms of crime fighting? Don't you think that's going to make a significant difference?
Well, firstly, it's an increase to the criminal justice sector of about 11%. Most of that's going to justice. And look, there has been an extra an amount of 4 billion, I think it was, that's been put towards the criminal justice system. But at the end of the day, we have to look, if we want to reduce violence, we're going to have to look somewhere else. Nowhere in the world has it been shown that the criminal justice system alone can actually bring crime down. The criminal justice system is exactly that. It's a system that helps to process cases efficiently once they've been reported. If we want to look at prevention, actually stopping crime happening before it starts, we have to look in other places. And it's actually the responsibility of other government departments and not necessarily these.
What about the army? Can they not be brought in terms of visible policing?
Visible policing, obviously you could use the army, and the army are in fact being used in various places. But we need to remember firstly there's the resource issue. Can you actually put enough army soldiers in all the hotspots? But I think a more important issue is that visible policing everywhere in the world has been shown to make people in the areas where they're visible feel better. It doesn't necessarily bring crime down. It's more to have a rapid response when something happens. It makes people feel that there's someone out there that they can go to when they're in trouble.
Siobhan, I see you nodding there. You obviously agree with that situation. You don't feel either that bringing in the army and doing a prevention rather than reaction would be the way to go.
Absolutely.
In terms of who's to blame for the ongoing crime problem, there's a cycle of people pointing fingers at each other, but ultimately where does that responsibility lie? Who is to blame? a difficult question to answer. I mean, to place blame on any system for that matter. I mean, as I explained earlier, it's more looking at the balances between prevention and law enforcement. And somewhere the government has to start looking at a more hardline approach to law enforcement.
In terms of what needs to happen to bring crime down, yes, we hear about all the crime plans and the things that have been done, but in your opinion, from the psychological point of view, that the public can actually have some kind of a belief that something proactive is being done. How do you get to that point?
Well, let's just look at go back to the fight and flight syndrome, as I explained. I mean, when you look at the fight syndrome, where they adopt in terms of resistance and anger, we shouldn't actually look at it as all negative, because people also are joining in neighborhood watches. So we can look at it more constructively. Community members are joining community police forums and taking a stand in that way. We're working with the law enforcement and working towards the crime.
Well, I'm afraid we're going to have to leave it there. Obviously a subject that we can go on and on about. Ladies, thank you very much indeed. Shabana Sakur from the Study for Violence and Reconciliation Centre. Antoinette Lowe, thank you very much indeed, the Institute of Security Studies. Thank you both for joining us. One of Cape Town's most notorious gang leaders has been arrested following a week of violence in the Hermanus area. The arrest is part of police action aimed at ending the gang warfare over drug turfs and Parliament poaching. 2 people have died so far and scores have been injured in the conflict. There's also concern that the unrest may affect the tourism industry in this whale watcher's paradise.
The fishing village of Houston is about 10 minutes drive from Hermanus. Most of its residents make a living from the sea. In the early 90s, as the demand for Parliament grew, poaching became a lucrative business. Armed with only a knife and a wetsuit, poachers can make a lot of money. Parliament currently sells for more than 200 rand a kilo. Over the last few years, gang kingpins moved into several coastal villages, trying to take control of the poaching trade. Since then, life in this sleepy town has never been the same. 2 years ago, gang leaders made a pledge to the Houston community to stop selling drugs. In a symbolic gesture, bags of dagga and crack were destroyed. The community are now questioning the sincerity of those actions. The current fighting is between the Rooidakkies gang based in Houston and the Naughty Angels in Mount Pleasant outside Hermanus. This member of the Naughty Angels says they just want to make a living. Residents say the continuing violence is affecting their families.
It's not nice. I mean, we're laying awake at night time, not knowing what's going to happen. My kids are nervous wreck.
In order to curb the violence, Operation Phosphate has been set up, and police and soldiers are patrolling the area. With the shootings also spilling over into the Hermanus town centre, concern is growing.
As a tourism authority, we're very worried about it, and we have spoken to the police, and it is a police matter, and hopefully they will handle it well.
A special task force will take over the operation at a later stage. The goal? To root out gangsterism in the area. Community leaders say longer-term solutions, such as job creation, could lift this impoverished community from the grip of gangs. In the meantime, it's images like these that will continue to taint the beauty of these towns. Johan Abrams, SABC, Houston.
Coming up after the break, all the sports news with Robert Marawa. Stay tuned.
Some would call Bert Troutman one of the world's most highly paid photographers. Others would call him a spy.
We know it's got aircon, CD player, and power steering. Plus it's got a boot the size of München.
Yeah, don't tell me. It looks great and goes like the wind. The all-new Ford Icon. It's a revelation.
Good evening.
evening and welcome back. Starting off with soccer news, Bafana are now at the top of Group B after beating Malawi by 2-1 in a World Cup qualifier at the Chichiri Stadium in Blantyre today. South Africa scored a goal in each half through Phil Masinga and second half substitute Siyabonga Nomvete. Malawi scored their consolation goal 5 minutes before full time.
Bafana were eager for an early goal but were let down by poor finishing. The bumpy and slippery pitch made it difficult for both teams to control the ball and to exchange decent passes. The home team started to dictate terms, with most of their moves initiated by Orlando Pirates midfielder LSU Dawali. Malawi's best opportunity came in the 16th minute through another South African base player, John Maduka of Bushbuck. However, Masina silenced the local crowd midway through the first half with an easy tap into goal. Malawi continued to pile on the pressure in the second half and were nearly rewarded after a defensive blunder by Frankie Skuma. Then Bafana second half substitute Siyabonga Nomvete scored with a header after connecting with a cross from Swisoko Zuma. Malawi were awarded a soft penalty in the 84th minute after Aaron Mukwena was adjudged to have handled inside the box. Patrick Mabedi made no mistakes from the score. Malawi pushed for the equalizer, but it was too late. This was Ramaran, SABC.
And staying with soccer, Orlando Pirates failed to stretch their lead at the top of the Premier Soccer League after playing to a 1-1 draw with struggling Bloemfontein Celtic. Celtic will be happy with today's single point at the hands of the log leaders. Sundowns gained maximum points by beating the other relegation candidates, Manning Rangers. Today's win makes Sundowns serious league contenders. Bushbucks shared the spoils with Kersal rookies Ria Stars. The game between Joma Cosmos and Classic also ended in a stalemate. Ajax Cape Town lost to newcomers Golden Arrows by 2-1. And on to boxing news. Roy Jones Jr. underlined his status as one of the best pound-for-pound fighters in the world when he stopped fellow American Derek Harmon in the 11th round to regain and to retain his world light heavyweight title in Florida. 32-year-old Jones is recognized as the champion by the three major bodies, the WBA, WBC, and IBF.
The challenger, who had not fought for nearly a year, carries the fight to Jones in the first 3 rounds. From the 5th round, Jones picked up his work rate and turned the fight with 10 speed and deadly combinations. But Hammond didn't give up and exchanged blows with the champion. In the 10th round, he took a heavy beating from Jones and failed to come out for the 11th round.
Now he opens it up some more.
Jones, who has lost 1 in 35 fights, recorded his 36 knockouts. He is now running out of opponents in his division. Jones' next fight is likely to be against the unbeaten foe, Darius Michelvesti, or the middleweight kingpin, Felix Trinidad of Colombia. Tabo Daniels, SABC.
Well, on to something more gentle. Golf news. South African professional Darren Fickard has won the Tour Championship at Leopard Creek, the final event of this year's Sunshine Tour. He carded a final round 68 for a 4-round total of 14 under par. Henioto finished well to take second place alone after a round of 67. But the round of the day belonged to Ernie Els. He spent the first 3 days ironing out all the kinks in his game and came home today in 65 despite going into the water on 18.
Fickard played extraordinary golf, making only 5 pars on the day. There were plenty of drop shots on his front nine, but he picked up his game, coming home to finish with a fine 68. Otto played well to keep the chasing players at bay and ended with a 67 despite missing an eagle on 18. Grant Miller's challenge never quite fired, but he finished with a more than acceptable 9 under, a shot ahead of Bradford Vaughan. Before the tournament began, Mark McNulty had secured the Order of Merit, but a number of important top places were up for grabs. second earns an automatic place in the British Open, and the top three play in the World Golf Championships in Spain. Vaughan jumps to second, with Roger Vessel sneaking into third. Young Trevor Immelman was in a line for the spot, playing probably the best tee to green game all week, but his putter let him down, and today he dropped 4 shots over the last 6 holes to fall out of contention completely. Janet Whitten, SABC.
And moving on to rugby news, Stormers centre Devert Barry has undergone surgery in Cape Town to repair a fractured cheekbone suffered in an incident involving his Cats counterpart Yappie Mulder in yesterday's Super 12 match at Newlands. Barry was injured in what appeared to be an off-the-ball incident, leading to calls for the perpetrator to be harshly punished.
The incident took place shortly after Mulder had been threatened by Barry with a perfectly legitimate tackle. Mulder was wrong-footed by an inside break by Robbie Fleck, but carried on to tackle Barry way off the ball. Barry was taken to hospital with a fractured cheekbone and will be out of rugby for at least 6 weeks. After the match, an upset Stormers coach Alan Solomons called for Mulder to be suspended for as long as the law allows.
There's no role in rugby, and it's an act of thuggery, and I hope it will be dealt with appropriately by the disciplinary committee.
Are you planning to take it further?
We, at half-time, I requested our manager to cite Yappie Mulder.
Cats captain Rossi Erasmus said although it was an unfortunate incident, there would always be rivalry between local sides.
After today, we back the Stormers, and I hope they back us. And I think the Bulls and the Sharks will back one another. The game is over, and we hope to get the South African team something.
Friday evening's match between the Sharks and the Bulls also threatened to boil over at times. But the chairperson of Southland's Referees Committee, Steve Strydom, says local rivalry is good for the game.
We find that in the New Zealand derbies, the Australian derbies, South African derbies, they're always tough, and it will be the same. It's good for the game. It's fantastic.
Strydom also expressed his satisfaction with the way in which the players had adapted to the new interpretation of the laws.
Players are staying on their feet. We're getting quicker ball. We're seeing better rugby. So great for the game, and we'll keep it like this.
It is expected that Mulder will appear before South Disciplinary Committee early next week. James Scholes, SABC, Cape Town.
Well, that's a wrap from the sports desk. Also good to know that Thomas Madikashke is out of hospital after that cardiac shock yesterday. But from the sports desk and myself, have a good night. I know you guys have some exciting news about an event that I was supposed to have attended.
Well, hard luck on that one indeed. The world's most famous carnival began in Rio de Janeiro on Friday. And until Tuesday, the city will rock to the samba rhythms as Brazilians prepare for Lent.
Nearly 350,000 tourists are expected to visit. And this year's unofficial title is the Carnival of Peace.
Enjoy and good night.
This Tuesday on Special Assignment, black and white farmers find common ground.
The cooperation between the emerging farmers and the established farmers is improving by the day.
These people, it means a great lot to have their own land.
The Promised Land. Special Assignment, Tuesday at 9:30 on SABC 3.
Good evening. It's time for a brief look at the weather. Sunny conditions and hot weather over the western parts of the country today, and cool, cloudy and rainy conditions over the central and eastern regions. We still have a broad band of tropical air, moist, unstable air coming down, It's been raining over the eastern parts of the country for most of today, mostly light stuff, and we expect that to continue over much of that region tomorrow. Hot, dry and windy conditions over the southwestern region and heat wave conditions for the Western Cape. Gale force southeasterly winds and the rainfall. Broad band of showers down to the southeastern interior, not quite reaching the coast over the southeastern regions. And for tomorrow, rather similar pattern with this rather strange pattern of rainfall over the Karoo, down into the Eastern Cape, rather better chance in the morning over Gauteng and the northwest provinces, up into Botswana and Namibia. Minimum temperatures, a mild to warm night lies ahead of us, particularly over the Uppington region and on the KwaZulu-Natal coast. And then the maximum temperature is still very hot over the western parts of the country. We have temperatures developing up into the 30s there, 35 at Uppington, very hot on the west coast. A little cooler on the Cape South at 25 at George, 27 at Port Elizabeth, very hot at Cape Town on 31. Little 20s for KwaZulu-Natal, and then cool conditions with elevated cooling on the northeastern Scotland, 22 at Bethlehem, 21 at Emlo, very hot in the Lowveld. Sunny conditions in the southwest, with gale force winds, partly cloudy to cloudy conditions elsewhere, fog patches on the northeastern Scotland. Do have a good evening.